Some bicycles on the road today feature rim brakes, whose brake arms mount around a single bolt at the middle, and around this bolt the brake arms can pivot, so it can be centered exactly on the wheel. In this video I'll show you its parts, I'll show you how it works when the cable is mounted to it, and how it's set properly, how the cable mounts not only through here but also how the cable runs through the brake lever and how the lever mounts on the handlebar. So let's get started in no particular order, but what necessitated taking it apart. This is the rear brake arm assembly. The front is fully functional, and over here I have the old brake lever assembly, which is beautiful and is obviously a Japanese dia-compe. It's branded like so, dia-compe, the brand. The lever and the brake arm are all marked the same way. This is dia-compe 500, and this is the washer here says dia-compe Deluxe. Okay, so that's how this looks like. It does have some other numbers on it, such as this one here on this spur. So this is how it looks like, how the casting looks like, dia-compe 500 and Deluxe. So what necessitated all this is this really old, this is a 1980 classic bicycle, 1980s, and now it's 2020, so the bicycle is around 40 years old. This rubber shroud looks absolutely horrendous, and I couldn't find a replacement shroud. They don't sell these anymore as is. They have whole brake levers like so, with the shroud and everything all together. So I tried to save this beautiful brake lever, but I couldn't, because this one has a top cable entry point, and so the cable anchor point there that you see inside the lever is at a different place than the cable anchor point in this one. You'll see, I'll get you a close-up, as well as the shape of the lever here. You can see that it pivots around this point here, so it has a long lobe here that goes around this pivot point. This one pivots around this point here at the front, so the shapes of the lever arms, even though they look similar, this long lobe here that this one has is missing entirely from this. It only comes out just about this much, so the arms cannot be changed. This is $17 and weighs significantly more than this, even with its shroud. So this is what necessitated all this brake work, in the process of which I had to shorten the cable jacketing, which was also kind of broken a little bit towards the end, and so I got rid of the bad bit. So as is, when the brake is set up, I like setting it up this way, so that minimal amount of travel on the brake lever's part, because I have long fingers and a long palm, and I just need minimal amount of travel on the brake lever here, or lever depending on the market, produces just a minimal amount of travel on the brake arms. So the brake pad is as close as possible, I don't know, 3 millimeters, something like that, away from the track part on the rim. Both sides are about 3 millimeters apart each. So that's how this is set up, that's how I like it set up. Of course it can be set up a little further apart if you have, because the lever cannot be adjusted to your finger length, but if you have of course shorter fingers, I'm just gonna make it like so, shorter fingers, it's gonna be a little too far away. You want the lever to be pulled a little bit without the pads touching, so it can be accommodated to smaller hands by loosening the cable with this single 8mm socket on a socket handle, like so, a socket driver. And when I loosen the cable, and I'm going to show you the cable's mounting point on this one up close, then some of the cable is going to of course run up, as this whole thing is spring loaded, and most importantly the brake pads will spring further away from the brake rim. So just take a look at it. There, it's not spectacular, but it did move out significantly, whatever. And right now the engagement point is much closer to the handlebar. So instead of the engagement point being here, now it's here. So that's one adjustment that's easy to do fairly. Let me show you this bolt here that clamps the cable. This bolt is this one, and it's very straightforward, a bolt and a washer, and the cable runs through this bolt in which there is this hole. So just thread the cable through the eye of the bolt, and then the bolt's head is also flattened at 2 points. You can see the shape of the hole is not a circular shape, so top and bottom is flattened. So that's what you see on the bolt. It's top here, or bottom, is flattened, so it only goes through and fits through, not this way but there, this way. Okay, so that's how it should line up when it's in place. And how it works is, you can see the gouge marks on this lobe here on the brake arm. This is where the cable is being clamped against. So as the nut is being tightened on this side against this washer, the cable is being clamped in this position, is being clamped there, like so, against this lobe on the brake arm, or this end of the brake arm. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and this is how it's gonna work. And this is how it works, like so. Now, the cable does not need to be pancaked or flattened beyond recognition. It is a safety device. It does need to be snug, alright, but it doesn't need to be tightened with gorilla force. Okay, you can see how much loosening it takes and how much tightening it takes. So if the cable is severely tightened, which was the case before, then it's going to put a permanent kink in the cable completely unnecessarily, and will also eventually break some of the cables, some of the wires in the cable. I think this one wire here is broken there. Now, one broken wire is, or one questionable wire, yeah, maybe not broken, maybe broken, I don't know, it's kind of borderline there, is not a deal breaker, especially if the cable is clamped higher up. The reason for it, because it's clamped now at a new spot higher up, because the jacketing had to be shortened, because the new lever, instead of top cable exit, is designed for side cable exit. You can see it on the rear here. Cable exits there, and is already taped to the handlebar, and this one is just halfway installed. So, because I'm not gonna worry about this damaged part on the cable, because it's gonna be mounted at a higher point. Even if the handlebar is raised, so you potentially need to clamp, instead of here, it's gonna be raised up higher and gonna be clamped further down. It's still gonna be above the old mounting point. So that's my consideration about the cable's integrity. The cable also runs through this fine adjuster. Let me show you what this fine adjuster does when it's actually mounted in place. And mounting everything together is fairly straightforward. It needs about this much time and a single tool to clamp it like so. Right now it's about where I want it to be for my hand. So this, before the fine adjuster, there's this lever on it. You see what the lever does? It spreads the brake pads. The purpose of this lever here is so when you want to take the wheel out of the frame, it has this quick release skewer. It spreads the brake pads. Because the tire is wider than the rim, the tire can pass through the brake pads surfaces without jamming in there. So this is pull the wheel out, and this is running normal operating distance between the two of them. Of course, if you have super shorty fingers and your brake is set up in a way that the pads are already further away there from the rim, as is, you might be able to pull the wheel out without backing the brake pads even further out. So how functional this is depends on how your brake pads distance is set up, where your braking point is on the lever. If you want it closer to the handlebar, then this will be of lesser importance. I'll show you a close-up here how this looks like. Very straightforward. It looks like this. And of course, without the cable, all it does, it raises this fine adjuster. It's important how the fine adjuster and this lever work together. The fine adjuster has this flattened part on it, so this has to be like, this is wrong. It will still work. You can see it's being raised and lowered, but this is how it should be. I hope that makes sense. This fine adjuster just comes out and this one just falls off. So these are easy to lose two components. This one is bolted to the brake arm. So one brake arm anchors the cable, the other brake arm has this fine adjuster on them, and the two move in a scissors motion like so against each other. So the fine adjuster has three parts. The inner part is threaded. The outer part, of course, is also threaded, but the inner part looks like so. And it raises the cable's jacketed end. I'll do it this way. It raises the cable's jacketed end up to tension the cable. Eventually the cable will stretch out. It doesn't matter where you set up the cables or the brake pads initially, cable will stretch. As the cable stretches, the brake pads will go further away from the rim. So with this you can tension the cable, and by doing so get the brake pads closer to the rim where they used to be when you first set up your brake. So besides this fine adjuster or adjuster being threaded, it also has a lock nut like so. So once you raise up the end point of the jacket, spin the lock nut so that it's there in place like so. So that's what this is, and that's what it looks like, and that's what it does. The cable's jacketing needs to be cut square, and if it's not, if it's cut on an angle or whatever, it's going to interfere with the cable's motion. So it needs to be just nice. Don't worry about the plastic too much on the jacketing. It's the metal coils underneath the jacketing that needs to be nice and square like this, so that the cable, as it runs through this adjuster, is centered properly and is surrounded nicely and evenly, just like so. Okay, I hope that makes sense. This is not rocket science, but there are some good details here that need attention. Last adjustment here before I show you the brake lever, how the cable runs through it, is that this assembly here has one more bolt here that is of concern, this one. And this being pulled off the brake, of course, this small leaf spring can slide off. I don't want to totally slide it off, but it can slide off. It rests against this cam here, or this surface, and a bolt is on this side which has a spring underneath. So what this does, it balances the brake arms and centers them, okay, the two together as a unit. So however this distance is already set up here between these two scissoring ends of the brake arms, this bolt will move them together in one unit. So I'm going to try to, there, I gave it a quarter turn clockwise, and you can see it raises them this way, going quarter turn back there. So there. Okay, so that's what it does, raise it up, and okay, so that's what it does. It kind of makes the whole brake arm assembly pivot around this single bolt. So that's that. Let me maybe raise you up a little bit on this tripod to see some detail inside this brake lever arm and bracket assembly here. Of course, like I said, this jacketing will be taped to the handlebar in a position that you like, and the jacketing had to be shortened. Instead of top exit point, I have a side exit point here, and I will be happy with about this much length in it. When this is taped, I can still make full left turn and right turn on the handlebar without the cable being too much in the way. I considered, if it's too much shorter, if somebody or you want to raise the handlebar's height, and then you don't want to run out of jacketing. So that's why it's about this long it's gonna be there. The jacketing runs underneath this rubber shroud, which is in really good condition. It can fold up like so, and let's see, how do I do this? And there. So how the cable runs through the brake lever assembly is fairly straightforward. It exits here at the front. This is the anchor end of the cable. The cable is not oily too much yet, and it needs to be, of course, lubricated properly. So the anchor end just sits here like so, but how it goes through this whole assembly here, it needs a flashlight. So I'm going to take you off the tripod. You're not going to see much at all, but you see one mounting bolt, and in front of it you can see the cable running. That mounting bolt I'm going to show you on the there, that's basically all you can see. Yeah, that mounting bolt is of course holding the whole bracket and brake lever assembly, everything on the handlebar. That bolt tightens a hoop. This hoop of course goes through there, the handlebar, and the head of the bolt, in this case, this one needs a hexagonal 5mm Allen key or hex key to tighten. This one needs a slotted screwdriver, and the end of the bolt is visible here. As the bolt is being tightened, this hoop is being pulled tighter and tighter around the handlebar. So that's how its position on the handlebar is kind of dictated or is secured by tightening that bolt. So putting the cable through this is fairly straightforward, and then tightening it to your position of comfort is fairly straightforward. You can adjust it sideways and up and down wherever you like it. So those are basically all the adjustments. I'm gonna lubricate the cable so it's a little oilier than it is now. It's not totally dry. Sometimes when you take apart some vintage bicycle like this, there's a white dust sitting on everything. This one is a little better than that. Good to go for lubrication. I'm gonna clean this front brake and remove it from the frame as I have removed and cleaned this, and then I'm good to go for a bicycle ride.